Alright, what is up? Welcome back to another video. Today's video is going to be a bit of a throwback to the forbidden year of 2020.
The breaking news, stay at home.
COVID-19, the disease that defined our lives in 2020.
A young Bronco at that point was just beginning his romping adventures, going out, taking photos, pretty much of anything. Some of them good, most of them bad, but really just taking photos for photos' sake. At that same time, I happened to be employed at a warehouse where I was tasked with the tall order of fixing cameras. And in some small part, I would say that kind of fueled the present and ongoing addiction. What also contributed to that was these hour-long discussions and debates that I would have with a coworker of mine, and I would go so far as to even call him a friend, where we would talk about the cameras that we were seeing often come into the shop, what we were working on, what we liked, what we disliked. And truly, my earliest biases were really forged in these crucibles of discussion while this apocalyptic pandemic seemed to rage on outside the doors of the warehouse. And the reason why I'm presenting all of this lore is I would like to today discuss one of the systems that often came up in this discussion. However, it was one that we often didn't see in the shop, and that is the Pentax Z-XM. Now, looking at this camera, it's nothing too special. It's kind of the similar grandma gold Pentax autofocus SLR aesthetic of the 90s, 2000s era. Very cheap, very plasticky feel, basic controls, basic kit lens, 35 to 80. Really nothing to write home about. However, this has something that those other cameras don't have. And for one, that is the physically articulating shutter speed selection dial here, kind of similar to the Pentax MX, the Spotmatics, the K1000s, the Pentax cameras of old. But it also has the ability to do this. Now this is the 40mm 2.8 Pentax K-mount lens, and this is another one of the things that popped up in our discussions of how sweet would this lens be to have with this camera. It'd be super compact, easy to use. And as you can see, I now own both of them. And it's interesting because I didn't actually buy this camera. I actually bought the Spotmatic, and this just so happened to come with it. And it wasn't until a little bit later that I realized what I truly had. Let me tell you, I am thoroughly impressed. Shooting with this thing is sublime. It has very intuitive controls. It is super lightweight, super compact. It has pretty much everything I'm looking for in a camera. The saying remains true. Every cowboy sings a sad song, and this camera sings a sad song all the same. That sound is the sound of inevitable failure. You see, with the abundance of electronics and plastic components in this system, something was bound to give. And that something so happens to be this small plastic gear that juts out from the motor drive system that basically operates this entire camera, from the film take-up to the mirror control. Everything in here is centered around this plastic gear that breaks. Now, at the time of our discussions 4 years ago, we didn't really have the means or the tools or the parts to replace that component. So this served as our white whale, so to speak, albeit with a gimpy fin. But despite the obvious contradiction, I really like this camera. At least once a week, I talk on this channel about the cameras I like that are strong, durable, dependable, reliable, consistent. So I understand the humor in me saying that this cheap consumer plastic camera is now one of my favorites because it is none of those things, seemingly. But I truly think what it is it is a master of all trades in a very simple way, where I can take this on a trip, and I've just shot film through it, and it's just been a fun, sublime experience of just quick point and shooting, and like not really thinking too much about, not a lot getting in between me and to capture a moment. But I also think that I can put an expensive roll of film in here, like a Provia, like an Ektar, like a Ferrania P33. I feel like I can really dial in and take my time with this system And that's something that I don't feel like I can do with other things. I think it serves all of those purposes really well, and in a way that invokes this pure nostalgic feeling of those conversations I was having with my coworker, of that time in my life where I was just taking photos. And all that in such a small, unassuming package makes it all the better. It's unassuming, but it's also unwelcome, because you think about Pentax cameras and you're thinking, oh, like the K1000 or the 6.7 or the 645 or the ME Super or whatever. You think of these like really solid quality cameras, or even maybe think about like the newer digital stuff. But this to me is not any of that. It is its own thing, and yet it still harkens back to the older era in ways that you can go through all the different shutter speeds. You can mount whatever lens you want on here. Pentax is actually one of the few companies that actually produce their own adapter for the K to M42 lens, because they wanted you to use those older M42 lenses on your newer cameras. And this reminds me of that. But it also reminds me of those conversations, of those times working in the warehouse, uncovering new ways to fix things, and just combination of uncertainty in my own life and its trajectory, as well as the uncertainty of the world around us. And I think, despite the fact that so many things are different, I'm much older now. The world at large has kind of moved on from the idea of the pandemic. I've moved on from that job, and I rarely talk to that coworker of mine, definitely not as much as we used to. But I think despite all of that, this really invokes that feeling that I had when I was just figuring out how to take photos. And because of that, I truly cherish this camera and the nostalgic feeling I get from it, and just the desire to create that this inspires me with. So it's not a great camera. It's not a terrible camera. It is a camera, and it is one that I look forward to fixing up in a future video. All that being said, I think I've waxed enough lyrical, but I appreciate you all watching, and I hope that you enjoyed the video. If you did, like it, and if you want to check out more, make sure to subscribe to the channel, and comment down below what your kind of guilty pleasure nostalgic camera is. I think I can safely say that this is mine, but I'm curious to hear what yours is. I'm going to probably put another roll of film in this and shoot through it, even though it is falling apart in my hands, but I just can't get enough of it. So thank you again for watching. I'll catch you on the next one.